All pertinent research on this matter indicates that there is not much point in release if you do not have a linkage in the community upon their discharge from the facility, from the institution. And given the fact that the prevailing levels of drug usage pre-incarceration for this inmate population may range as high as 80%, depending on whether it's an institution that houses felons or an institution that acts as a county jail, the first linkage needs to be with a drug treatment program. So then the thing that you need to be looking at is what is the most likely source of drug use disorder. And that used to be a fairly easy one to answer because it was all about alcohol-related problems with a secondary question of opioid usage, heroin in most cases. Now we're finding that the distribution is a little more evenly divided between pharmaceutical opioids, oxycodone, hydrocodone, and all of the different brand names that go around that. And on the other side of the fence, the stimulant class that tends to be most strongly represented by methamphetamine. Again, there's competition between methamphetamine and cocaine, but essentially those are the two areas you're going to be looking at in the discharge population. And their needs are a little different. So for me to just blandly say you've got to have linkage is a true statement. Something like a residential or even a day treatment program that deals with these folks has got to be able to completely occupy their alcohol and drug treatment needs. But it's also got to be focused on what the most likely source of drug usage was for them. The problem up until now for the longest time has been an either-or viewpoint about social treatment versus medication treatment, or whether either of those can be approached in an institution. I think what the treatment communities, the so-called therapeutic communities, show us is that if you can get the recovering population or the treated population to invest in their own treatment, and in fact to take responsibility for the cost of it, which is part of the notion of Delancey Street, get a job, build the place, make the enterprise work, that's a huge portion of engagement. But the other half of it has to be to deal with the very serious symptomaticity that these guys suffer. They didn't continue using drugs simply because they had nothing better to do. There were a variety of strong motivations, and a lot of that is biologically and biochemically mediated. There are medications that work with this. There are therapeutic approaches that work with this that involve one-on-one or group therapy, and they really do make it easier for people to come around to the belief that life works better without the drugs. The whole purpose of these treatment communities is to reframe your view of life so that it's not just an arduous task that you undertake, but it's a series of enthusing challenges that makes you feel that you've contributed to the world around you. If you want to teach an addict not to use, putting them in prison just teaches them not to get caught. I think there are ways to merge something like a staged response program associated with probation. Post-incarceration treatment is both useful and, in my view, essential. If you are actually going to reduce the population of people who are incarcerated in this country below the ridiculous level of millions that are presently inside barbed wire and walls, you have to provide a transitional phase for them to go through in order to be able to recover. There's no sudden drop into recovery. People do not just get cured. There's an interesting perception that people go through treatment and then they either relapse or they stay cured. It's a process. It's a protracted event that requires a considerable measure of feedback and effort, and continuous effort. It's why the residential treatment programs exist, is because they provide a safe environment in which to provide that continuous feedback, and that probably is the only way to make it happen. It makes no sense whatever otherwise to attempt to manage the treatment of these folks, and sadly, it's the way we have tended to do it for several centuries.